Ancient wisdom tales from many traditions speak of the natural cycle of sowing and reaping, planting and harvesting. It is a widely accepted truth that if you plant a tomato seed, you are likely to grow tomatoes. And if you plant a squash seed, you are likely to produce squash. If you plant zucchini, you are likely to be unpopular with your neighbors. The Apostle Paul is the one probably most often quoted from his letter to the fledgling church in Galatia, his words translated to, "What you reap, you shall sow." There's a lot to explore in this notion of reaping what we sow, far beyond the oversimplified version that Paul used to caution the Galatians about the rules they were developing for their own communities. It should be noted that the letter at that point in that community's development was meant to address the conflict about whether those who followed Jesus were Jewish and ought to be circumcised, or not Jewish and something else. It is understandable that for adult converts, that was a bit of a steep price. For the record, Paul recommended against it. Any parent or teacher or farmer can tell you that what you feed a growing thing also plays strongly into the resulting fruit of that growing season. In order to grow vegetables, soil must have a balance of carbon and nitrates and other things. There must be enough, but not too much water, and enough, but not too much warmth, enough, but not too much sunshine, and enough of the right kinds of bugs to pollinate, but not devour the harvest. We, meaning we as in human beings, very much like to separate things. We like to sort things into categories. Preschoolers are taught to differentiate between shapes and colors, and to be able to recognize when, in the famous words from Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the others. Now, this is likely rooted in some ancient evolutionary necessity that allowed us to sense danger by noticing what was different or out of place. And I suppose it still works in that way to this day. But there are a lot of ways in which our instinct to categorize things and people are distinctly unhelpful. Let us examine, for example, Liz Cheney. As Rebecca Solnit wrote this week, Cheney spent a lifetime embracing and promoting some truly terrible things. She supported the program that stripped babies from their families at the US border. She opposed pandemic relief programs. She voted with the former president something like 93% of the time, acting to do damage to the poor, working class, middle class people while enriching those who already have obscene amounts of wealth. And then she does this thing. She does this one virtuous thing, and it makes a stand on a principle. She voted to impeach the former president for his role in January 6th insurrection, and she has been relentless in her pursuit of the truth about that day's events. And that has cost her her seat in Congress. Is she a hero? A martyr? Her record resists making that blanket sort of judgment. Now, the former vice president spent 4 solid years supporting the president, his president, only acting in the 11th hour to certify the electoral vote when every effort to avoid that task avoided him. It was only after he asked everybody he could find for a way out and was told uncategorically that there was none. It was only after all of that that he did the right thing and stood up to his boss. Was he a hero? I don't know. I'd hardly call him anything like a profile in courage. But he did make some very hard choices on that day. and behaved that one time in a way that was both patriotic and brave and right. No matter how large and magnificently complex our brains might be, we truly prefer things to be simple. We like them to be left or right, binary, good, bad, noble, crass. This person is good, that one is evil. And of course, no one is entirely good or bad. No one is entirely perfect or totally depraved, as Calvin declared. If humans developed in hermetically sealed containers, we might continue to adulthood as we began at birth, but that's not how life works. Every time we encounter something new, experience a new sensation, learn a new thing, meet something or someone unfamiliar to us, we are changed by that experience. None of us reaches adulthood as the exact model we were issued in the beginning. Every day affects us. The air we breathe affects us. The cleanliness of that air affects us. The food we eat, the water we drink, the books we read, all of it affects the fruit of the harvest. Some processes teach us to bend. Some things teach us to resist. And along the way, we develop a sense of what is right and wrong for us and for our worldview. An interesting note, I had the opportunity to be on a retreat at the, I think it was Biosphere 2 in Arizona, giant sort of terrarium that they locked a bunch of scientists in for a few years. We got to tour the place. It was really fascinating. And one of the things that they remarked about is that there were a lot of trees that they had planted in this environment to see how big they would grow without, wind knocking them down and stuff. And what they learned was that the trees would only grow so far and then they would crumble. Because within this biosphere, there was no wind to move them, to cause them to build strength. So they simply grew until their structure could no longer support the weight because it had never built the muscle to keep itself aloft. I think life is like that. We can wrap ourselves in bubble wrap, but then we never learn to have the muscles we need to engage with challenges. The American dream is built on the notion that change is possible and indeed within reach of each of us if we work hard and are virtuous in the right kinds of ways and play by the rules. As Unitarians, we understand that each person has inherent worth and dignity, that all people have value with or without any kind of effort. We are valuable because we are. We exist, we are human. As universalists, we understand that each person, however flawed or imperfect, is deserving of God's love, and that redemption is available to all. Everyone is eligible for the kind of transformational experience that beset Ebenezer Scrooge at the end of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. We all have the capacity for transformation. We are familiar with the rags to riches cliche. It's a genre of stories that were made popular in North America, the 19th century, by a Unitarian minister by the name of Horatio Alger. Horatio Alger served the Unitarian congregation in Brewster, Massachusetts, down on the Cape, and was famous beyond the world of Unitarianism for authoring a series of short stories that appeared in newspapers. They are based on a character or a caricature named Ragged Dick, a sort of Dickensian orphan who managed to succeed through a combination of his own effort and the occasional intercession by a benevolent and wealthy adult mentor who helped him to achieve great things. Those stories were very popular in the young United States because they supported the hopeful notion that anything was possible. A little hard work, a little luck. They truly were the storyline of what we came to understand as the American dream. Except, like with Forrest Church, life is not so simple. Horatio Alger was drummed out of ministry for gross sexual misconduct among the members of the children's choir. Oops. Forrest Church was a brilliant theologian who nearly split his congregation in half due to his unrepentant misconduct. His hubris, Forrest Church's hubris, was remarkable. As he was conducting an affair, he offered pastoral support to the woman's husband, who was having trouble with his marriage. A short number of years later, he wrote a lengthy piece in the UU World about how as Unitarian Universalists, we really should become more comfortable with identifying and using the word sin and calling it out for what it was. Does that negate all of his brilliant theological writings? What do we do? You know, Theodore Geisel, beloved Dr. Seuss, was racist. He did a lot of work for the War Department, combating anti-Semitism. That's how he got his start as a cartoonist. He was a propagandist for the War Department. And later drew risque cartoons for the New Yorker before, Hop on Pop and Horton Hears a Who. Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood in America, was a eugenicist. She sought first and foremost to seek the unfed, to seek to curtail, I'm quoting from memory here, the unfettered breeding of the lower classes. It is not a mistake that her first clinic was in Harlem. She did so much of the right thing for all the wrong reasons. And we as Unitarian Universalists really struggle with this stuff. We would like her to be far more well-behaved, please. We would like Horatio Alger to not have that horrible blemish. We would have liked it if Forrest Church had behaved himself better. We struggle when we learn that our heroes have feet of clay. We are more challenged when our villains behave with integrity and courage. We want our angels to be angelic, thank you, and our demons to be demonic, and it is confusing when they switch roles. And yet, this is where humanity comes in. Who among us cannot look back at our past and cringe at the things we have said or done? It was said recently in that great tome of wisdom known as Facebook, that if you are able to look back at your past and not cringe, you have not grown. Who among us, particularly those who are of an age greater than, say, 35, do not whisper a silent prayer of gratitude when we consider how our lives would be different if social media had existed in the 1980s? I got sober at a young age, not because some high-minded commitment to self-improvement, but because my life was an unmitigated dumpster fire. And I, not unlike the former vice president, had tried every other option and failed. When all the other choices were exhausted, then I did the right thing. Humans sometimes can be like water and electricity in that we take the path of least resistance. The human mind tends to freeze memories as they are made, this little pigeonhole sort of thing. And we resist updating those memories in favor of what has come. Think about how you see your children or maybe your grandchildren. If you closed your eyes and in your mind's eye recall an image when one of their names is said, what is that image? Is it the image of today or is it the image of when they were born? Or when they first went to school? Maybe you're in their first high chair, first bicycle, graduation from high school, college, wedding, when they became a parent. And for those of us who are living with members of older generations, how often do you recall being treated as though you aren't actually in your 50s? Right? You know, my parents always behaved as though I was still 12, right? Sometimes they still do. All of my parents are dead, so that's not accurate. But it is a lament I have heard from many friends. And this is not a judgment. This is an observation about the chemistry of the human brain. It's what we do. We like to pigeonhole things. We like to put things into categories. Sometimes we call those things child or student or parent. And we resist when people change and develop and no longer fit into the categories we have assigned them. The original question in today's title, can we reap more than we sow, came about as I looked at the trajectory of Liz Cheney's political career. Now, I will say, if you think her career is over, that would be a mistake. We might think, though, if we look at it, that she is reaping what she sowed all those years ago. She supported the kind of neo-fascist policies that allowed room for this particular brand of conservatism to emerge, and it has eaten her alive. She is reaping what she sowed. On the other hand, her behavior in these past year, what is that she's sowing? And what might it reap for her? Because our lives are only linear in theory. We do not follow a single trajectory, beginning at point A and ending at point Z. Generally, there's a long arc, yes, but we do anything but make that in a straight line. We are like one of those doodles, you know, from point A to point B, and it goes up and it goes around. And it's like the Family Circus cartoon, right? Where Billy goes to get a drink of water, but ends up across the street and up a tree. That's how we go through life. We get up every day and we sow something. And we reap something. I could invoke biblical somethings. But I learned long ago we're Unitarians and we don't do weather. That's not us. That's not our thing. We do justice. We don't do weather. So, but our origin is not our destiny. And we can say that, but what does that mean when we see somebody who we perceive as a villain behaving like a hero? And what do we do when we see somebody who we've thought of as a hero and find out that they're gravely imperfect? And each day affects us, like each day affects a growing plant. How much nutrition we get, how much sunshine we get, how much water we get, perhaps more than others this morning. So I want to invite you to think about what it is you might do today, what it is you might plant today. Because a lot of us are, on the other side of that 35 line, we're thinking about what are we going to be reaping? But we plant something every day when we wake up. So what do we want to plant today to reap later? Or what do we want to plant today for future generations to reap? It has been said that altruism is planting a tree under which you will never sit, or an orchard from which you will never eat. So the time is still before us. We are still able to make change. We are not doomed to simply reap what we have sown. We are still able to sow. None of us is solely the very best or worst thing we have ever done. None of us is entirely someone's first impression of us. Thank God. Right? So I want to leave you this morning with the thought, what would I do if I could plant something right now? What would I plant? And then I want to invite you to do that. Think about it. Carry that with you during the week. May our practice be our prayer. Blessed be and amen.